Okay, today I want to talk about overdrive. If you're like me, you've got more than a few overdrive pedals laying around, and they all sort of do different flavors of the same thing. They can be, a light to medium gain sort of color adder, or they can be full on sort of change your amp's character and voice to something that it's not capable of doing on its own. Now, overdrive is a simple effect. It's pretty easy to understand, but I think there's some concepts and some ideas that I don't see people talk about a lot here on YouTube. And I want to cover those ideas today. These are things that sort of took me a while to wrap my head around as a guitar player when using and buying overdrive pedals. This is not going to be a list of things that I think you need to buy. I think you can do all of this stuff with what you probably already have laying around. But if you do want to check out any of the stuff that I'm using in today's video, like these overdrive pedals, check the links in the description box down below. Those are Sweetwater links, and I want to thank Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. Sweetwater has a massive selection of not only overdrive pedals, but some of the other things that we're going to talk about today that should go with your overdrive pedals that you might already have. So thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. Check the links in the description. Again, those are affiliate links. If you purchase anything through that, I earn a small commission. Helps me out in running this channel, and I greatly appreciate it. So with that out of the way, let's grab a guitar, get plugged in, and talk about the first point. To start off with, before you buy another overdrive pedal, get an EQ. Having a good EQ on your board is super useful. It can fill a lot of different roles, but in the context of using it with an overdrive, a good EQ pedal will kind of expand the overdrive's capabilities. So for an example, I've got just a stock tube screamer here on the board. And I know if you watch my channel, you know I'm not a fan of these things, and you'll see why in just a second. But I'm gonna the tube screamer with this EQ. So the EQ I'm using is the Empress Para EQ. This is a really, really good 3-band parametric EQ, but there's a lot of other options out there. This one's pretty pricey because it has a lot of different features, but you don't have to spend this kind of money to get a really great EQ pedal. Okay, so for reference, I'm playing my my Greco Les Paul clone here through my pedal board, which has the 2 pedals patched into it. And then I'm going into my 64 Princeton hand-wired. This is not a real 64 Princeton, it's the modern hand-wired version. And I've got it set kind of how I like to leave it here in the studio when I'm recording with it, which is pretty clean. So to start off with, I've got a humbucker Les Paul style guitar here, which are known for being very mid-rangey and punchy. And I'm playing into a Fender, which are known for being somewhat mid-scooped, but listen to this overdrive sound by itself and tell me what you think about it. That is far from the ideal overdrive tone for me. It's dark, it's muddy, it's like putting a blanket over my sound. Now I can start by pushing the tone control up on the tube screamer. Now that's a little better. It's not what I'm looking for though. I want something that's got a nice glassy and articulate top end that's still smooth and has some mid-range kick and is not muddy. And obviously the tube screamer on its own is not capable of doing that. So I'm gonna go back to where it was and I'm going to turn on the EQ. So to start off with, let's put everything sort of at noon. So right now when I engage the EQ, nothing should really change. Now I know what I'm looking for. I want to clean up that muddy mid-range and I want to add more top end and articulation and sparkle. So in this particular pedal, we have 3 bands, low, middle, and high. And then we have the particular frequency. This is a parametric EQ. So use this top row to dial in the specific frequency that you want to either boost or cut. And then you boost or cut with this gain control down here. But this is like a real true full-featured EQ in that you have a Q control up here, which is sort of how wide or how narrow the band is that you're boosting or cutting. And then on this bottom row down here, I have a high-pass filter, I have a low-pass filter, and then I have a high and low shelf option. This is really powerful EQ. And we also have a boost circuit, which we'll get to in a second. So to start off with, I know that I'm looking to sort of clean up that lower muddy kind of mid-range. My approach with EQ is to start by cutting first. General rule of thumb that you should understand with any kind of EQ, whether it's a pedal, a plugin, a piece of hardware, if you're boosting a frequency, you're adding gain. And if you're cutting a frequency, you are decreasing gain. And that's going to be important here in just a second. So start off with, I'm going to grab this mid control. So I've got 600 hertz here. So I'm going to start with it kind of at noon. I'm going to boost the gain quite a bit. And then I'm going to sweep the EQ point around until I find the muddiness, and then I'm going to cut it. Now, immediately, that feels better to me. It's less muddy, it's less sort of compressed, but I still am lacking that top end. So I'm gonna do the same thing, but on the high band here. Much better. Now, I'm still wanting some more glassy top end. So for that, I'm going to grab this little control down here, which is the high shelf, and I'm just going to boost sort of the general high end altogether. Massive difference, especially with the neck pickup. Now the neck is actually usable with this sound. Now to drive this point home even further, I'm going to play this in the context of some music. So I've got kind of a just lo-fi vibey loop thing going on here with my Octatrack and the Digitact Mark II. And I'm going to just sort of improvise and play over the top with and without the EQ. And you should hear the difference almost immediately. Huge difference. Now, a minute ago, I mentioned that this also has a boost, and this is great because you can use this pedal not only as an EQ, but then also as a gain boost to get a little extra drive, another gain stage in front of your amplifier. Now, I will say, if you like this video, I have a whole course that you might be interested in checking out. It's called the Tone Course. I believe in order to get the sound that's in your head to come out of the speakers of your amplifier, you need to understand some of the fundamentals of how the electric guitar and amplifiers and effects work. And that's what this course is all about. We start at the source, talking about sort of the architecture of different pickups and how they work and the different guitar types. And then we go in depth into tube amplifiers, talking about sort of the fundamental ideas of how they work, how to dial in any sort of tube amp to a specific guitar or a specific sound that you might be going for. Then from there, we take an in-depth look at a lot of these effects like overdrive, compression, EQ, fuzz, and not just tell you how to get certain sounds, but try and get you to understand what's actually going on so that you can get the results you're looking for no matter what gear you have or are looking to buy. So if you're interested in checking out the tone course, I'm going to offer it for a pretty big discount right now via the link in the description box down below. Down there, you can also find out more information about what's included in the course and some of my other courses that are available as well. So thank you for checking it out. And now on with the video. Okay, so part 2 is something a little bit controversial. Whenever I say this, I tend to get pushback in the comments from people, but this is something that I deeply believe is true. And I learned it from Tim Pierce. Tim is one of those players that has forgotten more about guitar and guitar tone than I'll ever know, so I trust what he says. And the idea here is that good cleans are actually a little dirty. I've switched guitars here. I've got my Jazzmaster and we're still into the Princeton. I've added a little bit of reverb from the Princeton, but the overall gain level of the amp hasn't changed. We're still in that sort of super flat, clean tone kind of area. So pretty good clean tone, right? Not anything to write home about, but it's not bad at all. Now on the desk here, I've got the Ultraphonix Special Overdrive from Vertex. And this is basically like a Dumble Overdrive Special in a box kind of sound. But instead of using it as a Dumble in a box, I'm actually gonna keep the gain really, really low. And I'm gonna keep the overall volume at unity, which means that when I kick the pedal on, the volume of the amplifier isn't really going to change. What is gonna change though, is the fact that we're introducing a little bit of clipping, a little bit of distortion or overdrive from the pedal in front of the amplifier. Now I'm gonna play with this loop again, and I'm gonna start without the overdrive pedal, and then I'm gonna kick it on. And I want you to see if you can hear or feel the difference. So you should notice two things there. First of all, the notes sort of stick out a little more. They're a little clearer overall, and you can sense a little bit of that overdrive coming through, but to my ear, that sound doesn't read as overdriven. Like there's not a ton of gain or saturation on it. It's just a little color. And that color is actually harmonics. So when we're adding this distortion circuit or this overdrive circuit in, we're adding a little bit of clipping into our signal. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of clipping here. I've done that in other videos. When we clip or distort our signal, part of what we're doing is adding harmonics, harmonic overtones into the sound, and it's giving it more information, basically. Now, my favorite video on YouTube about the harmonic series is the one that Andrew Huang made a few years ago. I'll link that down below. It's incredibly well done, and it should get you up to speed on understanding the harmonic series inside and out and why things like this occur, why when we add harmonics to our sound, it helps things sort of step forward a little more. But the other thing that's happening is I'm getting more sustain out of the notes. And that's because overdrive and compression are sort of two sides of the same coin. See, even though we call this type of pedal an overdrive pedal, really what we're doing is introducing distortion. And that's the same thing that we do when we engage a compressor, whether it's a compressor pedal on our board or we're using an outboard compressor or a plug-in. We're distorting the original signal. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned clipping, and I said I wasn't going to go too deep into it, and I'm not. But a very brief overview is that when we're overdriving or distorting a signal, we are clipping the signal. So essentially what's happening in these overdrives, like this Ultraphonix Ultraphonix here is there are components. These can be diodes, LEDs, transistors, lots of different things that are sort of taking the place of a tube in a tube amplifier. These devices are there to amplify the signal. And these little amplifiers have a certain range that they work in. But as you start to push the signal beyond the range that that little amplifier, the tube, the transistor, the diode, is capable of producing, it starts to clip the signal. This is where we get overdrive. The term overdrive comes from the fact that we're overdriving the tube in the amplifier or the transistor in a pedal, for example. Now, if you think about it, when you kick on a compressor, the compressor is doing the same thing. It's just going about it a slightly different way. And with a compressor, I have more control typically over how the signal is getting distorted. So when my signal crosses the threshold of a compressor and it starts to compress, that kind of is clipping the signal. It's distorting the signal. Now, that's not to say that when you turn on a compressor, you're going to get an overdrive sound. That's a different thing altogether. But overdrives have a similar effect that compressors do. When we're clipping that signal, we're compressing it. And one of the byproducts of compression is getting more sustain generally out of our notes. So let's go back to the Ultraphonix here. When the pedal's off, I'm getting a little bit of compression and a tiny bit of saturation because I'm playing into a tube amplifier. And tubes naturally introduce some harmonics and some compression. That's why we like them so much. But this sound that I have pulled up here is pretty clean. I'm not getting a lot of that distortion or overdrive or saturation. When I kick on the Ultraphonix, again, I'm not getting a ton of gain, but I'm getting some saturation, some overdrive, which is introducing the harmonics, and it's giving me a little more compression. It's really more apparent on like single note lines. Now, most of the time when I want a clean sound, in the context of recording or playing with a band, I'm actually using a little bit of overdrive. And that's not to say you always have to do it. There are plenty of examples of amplifiers and guitar sounds that are just truly like painfully clean. If you've ever played a Roland JC120, you know it's a great sounding amp and it's been used a ton to great effect, but it's not doing this overdrive sound. But if you're mostly a clean guitar player and you find yourself struggling to be heard in the mix or with your band, try taking an overdrive pedal and just turning it on to add a touch of overdrive. And I think you'll be surprised at how much better it works. Okay, so those are things that nobody tells you about overdrive. I hope you found this video useful, and I want to hear from you in the comments section down below. What are some things that you think I should have covered or might have missed or might not know about when it comes to overdrive and how to use it with your amp or model or plugin, whatever. If you'd like to check out the tone course for a discount, click the link in the description box down below to find out more about what's included in that course. And once again, thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. Links to all the stuff is down there. You guys know what to do. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Rhett Shull, and I will catch you on the next one.